Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into the haunting, incredibly fascinating sci-fi universe of echoes of the unseen. We're going to explore a terrifying scenario that literally strips away the single most important thing that makes us human, and then look at the absolutely chaotic, desperate fight to get it back.
So, what if losing your mind was literally the only way to save humanity? I mean, think about that for a second. Hooking right into this central, provocative paradox is honestly the best way to understand the engine driving this entire narrative. You see, this isn't your typical story about a virus that destroys the body. No, it's a story about a pathogen that targets our minds. It leaves our bodies perfectly fine, but totally steals our future. And the cure? Well, the cure looks a whole lot like absolute madness.
Moving into Section 1, the Gray Epidemic, the profound loss of imagination.
The plague in this world arrived completely without fanfare. Doctors originally slapped the clinical name cerebrum oblivio on it, but people just called it the Gray. And the creepy part? There was no fever, no dramatic physical collapse, nothing like that. It was a silent, airborne pathogen that just systematically hollowed out the human mind. First, it targeted creativity, then imagination, and finally, the very will to dream. The most terrifying part is that infected people kept right on working. Factories hummed, trains ran perfectly on time, but no new songs were ever written. No new paintings went up in galleries. It was an epidemic of complete and total stagnation. 97%. Just wrap your head around that number. By the end of the very first year, 97% of humanity had completely lost their creative spark. The infection spread through the air, through touch, through the water supply. Practically everyone on Earth was hollowed out, reduced to just emotionless workers, mindlessly reciting old facts without an ounce of wonder left in them.
The collapse was terrifyingly rapid and methodical. Check out this timeline. Just 14 months after the first confirmed case popped up in a remote lab in Kazakhstan, the very last patent for a novel invention was filed. Innovation just hit a brick wall. By the end of year 1, boom, we hit that devastating 97% infection rate. And by year 3, which is the present day of our story, the world is perfectly functional, but totally, fundamentally dead. Even arguments ceased because, well, arguing requires imagination, right? The world just evolved into this ordered, eerie stillness.
That brings us to Section 2, Life Behind the Veil, meeting the mutants.
But hey, not everyone succumbed. Roughly 1 in 10,000 people happen to have this incredibly rare genetic quirk in the SLC6A4 gene cluster. This anomaly actually granted them immunity to the Gray, but man, it came with a massive psychological price tag. Scientists called it the veil. These immune survivors were basically forced to experience constant, vivid, completely overwhelming hallucinations of alien worlds. And we're not talking about simple daydreams here. These were living, breathing overlays slapped right on top of reality that just never, ever stopped. Our main characters, Dr. Elena Voss and Marcus Hale, are stuck living this wild, split-screen existence. On one side, you've got baseline reality. Gray streets, automated drones dropping off nutrient paste, and people trudging to labor shifts in dead silence. But on the other side, through the veil, Elena sees these insane crystalline forests with towering spires of violet glass and entire cities floating on liquid mercury rivers. Marcus sees these massive storms of living light where lightning literally writes out mathematical equations that solve themselves. It is a chaotic, overwhelmingly beautiful contrast to the totally stark, dead world around them.
So, why exactly does this immunity look so much like madness? Well, Marcus, who used to be an artist, comes up with this brilliant neuroscience theory. He thinks the Gray is a prion-like pathogen specifically targeting our creative pathways. In the mutants, their genetic quirk hyperactivates the brain's default mode network, the center responsible for our imagination. The brain is fighting back against the pathogen so aggressively that it actually breaks through into parallel evolutionary paths. So these hallucinations, they're essentially a terrifying spillover. The human brain was never ever supposed to handle this much dimensional input, but that mutation basically flipped a switch and overloaded the system.
There's this really poignant moment where Elena admits that she sometimes sees total horrors instead of beauty. Marcus just looks at her and says, "Good, means we're not crazy in the same way. Complementary madness." I love that line. It really highlights how these mutants absolutely have to rely on their shared chaotic visions just to survive. They're like little islands of chaos in a vast sea of stillness, and they have to lean heavily on each other's unique madness to stay somewhat grounded.
All right, on to Section 3, Gathering the Spark, a dangerous community.
Before all this, Elena was a neuroscientist totally dedicated to curing Alzheimer's. Her goal was to map the creative impulse to restore it in damaged brains. But now she comes to this absolutely heartbreaking realization. The whole world basically has Alzheimer's of the soul. And the deep irony here, the only people equipped to help are the ones whose minds are constantly breaking reality. They aren't just survivors anymore, they might actually be the cure itself.
As Elena and Marcus travel around, they start gathering other mutants, forming what they affectionately call the community of the deranged. And it's fascinating because each person's veil brilliantly manifests their own unique creative spark. You've got Sophia, who constantly sees endless libraries where the books just write themselves. Then there's Cal, a former soldier, whose veil turns the horrors of war into this beautiful sacred geometry. And young Amara, whose visions are so utterly overwhelming she barely speaks above a whisper. Together, they form this highly dangerous, incredibly unpredictable community that the functional gray world absolutely fears.
And that fear really comes to a head during a super pivotal, honestly heartbreaking moment in the ruins of Vienna, when a great patrol attacks them. In the middle of this ugly, chaotic firefight, where Coel tragically loses his life, Marcus does something totally extraordinary. He just stands up and starts singing. But he's not singing a normal human song. He sings a melody straight from the veil. A song that feels like it exists in 4 dimensions and literally bends the light around him. And the craziest part? The emotionless, functional soldiers actually falter. One guy even drops his rifle, just completely struck by the sheer beauty of it. That right there is the proof they needed. The gray can be broken. Those functional humans can still feel tiny echoes of the spark.
Which brings us to Section 4, the resonance event, breaking the quarantine.
Now, Marcus develops this grand, epic sci-fi theory to explain what's really going on. He theorizes that the gray was not some random accident. Humanity was basically on the verge of incredible runaway evolution. Think AI, neural links, literally connecting our minds to the universe itself. The gray, he argues, was a universal defense mechanism, a cosmic panic button, if you will. It was a strict quarantine placed on human potential, which means Elena, Marcus, and their band of mutants. They are the ultimate quarantine breakers.
So, how exactly do you break a universal quarantine? Well, you amplify the spark. You have to create a resonance event. The group makes this massive trek to the abandoned Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. Step 1. They gather 43 mutants right in the center, surrounding them with 200 functional humans who made the pilgrimage just hoping to feel something, anything, again. Step 2. They use scavenged generators to power up those massive collider magnets. And step 3, they unleash pure, unrestrained creation. No fancy rituals, just 43 minds completely violently opening up to the veil. They paint, they sing, they shout out descriptions of alien worlds. And you know what? It actually works. The veil physically merges with the tunnel. People start awakening. Colors flood back into the world. Their collective creative output literally punches right through the barrier that was placed on human potential.
Section 5. Invitation to Evolve. Imagination finally returns.
Now, the world obviously doesn't change overnight, but the tide definitely turns. Imagination becomes sacred once again. The gray slowly recedes. We start seeing that children born after the resonance event are showing way higher rates of creativity. Art returns to the world, and not just pristine art, but messy, imperfect, gloriously human art. Science surges forward again too, but this time it's firmly tempered with the profound, painful knowledge of exactly what happens when we lose our ability to dream.
Years later, they're living quietly by the Danube, with the veil still softly whispering in the backs of their minds. Elena asks Marcus a really profound question. Was the veil a curse, or was it a gift? I mean, it literally drove them to the brink of insanity, but it also saved the entire human soul. Amara, who's grown up to be a teacher for the newly awakened, suggests something else entirely. She says it was neither. It was an invitation. The gray was just the universe's way of saying not yet, and their mutation was simply the key they didn't even know they possessed to finally unlock the door to the next level.
Marcus compares the veil and really consciousness itself to fire. Think about it. If the universe handed you the match of consciousness, would you choose to just warm yourself safely, or would you choose to burn? Our characters chose to burn, and they burned brightly, risking their own sanity to reignite the imagination of the entire world. It really leaves you pondering the incredible power and, frankly, the sheer necessity of our own messy, chaotic creativity. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Echoes of the Unseen, and until next time, keep exploring.